Hello my friends, my name is Rich and welcome to Greatest Rock and Metal. On Greatest Rock and Metal I talk about what are for me the greatest rock albums, bands, gigs of all time, based on going to hundreds of gigs and listening to thousands of albums over many years. If you enjoy what you see today, please press the red button to subscribe. It's free, it's easy to do, and I'd be very grateful. Thank you very much. Okay, so today the featured band is the band Gillan. Here are Gillan on my shirt, and here is the main man, Ian Gillan. Ian Gillan, of course, came to fame as the lead singer of Deep Purple in the 70s. And Gillan Band, my introduction to Gillan Band, well, it came with an album that I've spoken about many times. This album really was a great introduction to rock and metal for me. The album was Axe Attack, which was a compilation album of great rock and metal tracks from around that period of time in the early 80s. And the song that I was listening to on the album, A Running White-Faced City Boy. This was in 1980 and it was taken from the 1980 Gillan album, Glory Road. And that was my first introduction to Gillan. Now I'd heard Deep Purple before, and of course the legendary track Smoke on the Water, my introduction to Deep Purple, but I didn't know much about who was in Deep Purple. I knew about Ritchie Blackmore, I didn't know about the singer at that time, and quickly I put together the knowledge that this singer Gillan was also the singer in Purple as well previously. So I wanted to learn more about Gillan. Looking back at the Gillan Band history, just the Gillan Band history here, they were formed in 1978. Now this was 5 years after Gillan had left Deep Purple. He'd had another band prior to Gillan called the Ian Gillan Band. And they were two very different types of bands. The Ian Gillan Band was very much like a jazz rock fusion type of band. I did have a live album of theirs, never got into it at all. And then in the 80s, he decided, in 1978, he decided he was going to form Gillan Band and go more in the hard rock vein that he'd been doing with Deep Purple. Had a couple of initial releases that didn't get much attention, and then in 1980 the Glory Road album is the one that really started to prick people's ears up. And then in 1981, the following year, we had this album, the album Future Shock. And this is going to be the featured album today because this month is the 40th anniversary of the release of this album. And this is considered probably on a par with Glory Road as being the classic Gillan album. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. One of the things that made the Gillan Band so great was the guitarist Bernie Tormey, who you can see in the picture over here. Also in the band were keyboardist Colin Towns and one of the main writers of the songs actually, bassist John McCoy, the bald head and the big figure, very prominent visually in the Gillan Band. Mick Underwood on drums and the amazing Bernie Tormey on guitar. Very, very underrated guitarist. It's such a shame Bernie sadly is no longer with us, but Bernie Tormey had so much talent, and he had a brilliant guitar style, sound, tone of his own that was very, very distinctive, and went a long way to making albums like Glory Road and Future Shock such great albums. Sadly, with a bit of a disagreement, Tormey left the band in 1982 and was replaced by a guy by the name of Janet Gers, who today many people will know him as one of the guitarists in Iron Maiden. Gers, a great guitarist, although he doesn't have that distinctive style or sound to my ears that Tormey brought to the band, but he still contributed to a couple of great studio albums. But by the end of 1982 it was all over. So a very quick run for this band, only around for 4 years, and a shame, because I thought they were a great band. What I also thought about this period of time for Gillan himself, Ian Gillan himself, for me, this was the point in his career when his voice was the strongest and the best sounding. Of course, he made some brilliant albums with Purple, and his voice sounded great with Purple, but he matured his voice, and those Gillan albums in the early 80s, check them out if you want to hear Ian Gillan's vocals at their real peak. Phenomenal vocal performances on those albums. Okay, so let's go on to this album, the featured album. 40 years ago, Future Shock. And another thing I'll say about this album and most of the Gillan albums is, despite the fact they have a lot of keyboards in them, which can often date an album in my opinion, these albums do not sound very dated at all, and they still rock just as hard, and they sound just as brilliant as they did way back in the day. Brilliant production and engineering work on these albums. Now, so Future Shock, love the artwork on this album, and it was one of the things that attracted me to it back in the day. Great sci-fi artwork. Now actually, when it was presented to the band, they weren't that, it wasn't as good as what they expected it to be, and many art critics said it wasn't that great artwork, but I love it. I think it's brilliant. Now this is a special vinyl edition of Future Shock album. This was released nearly 10 years ago now, and it's a fantastic presentation. This is one of the best, if you're going to reissue vinyl albums of classic albums, this is a great way to do it. First of all, hardback cover, like a book. Well, it is a book really, because when you open it up, what you get is a beautiful presentation. We've got, it's been mastered at 45 RPM, so there's 2 vinyl albums. I'll just pull out one of them. You get a nice picture there from back in the day, and then a historical essay about this period of time. Just the normal black vinyl album. Nothing special with that. But what is special is the way it's presented, as I say. Presented as a book. Beautiful cover there. Great quality of paper, and what you get is a combination of the other bits of artwork that were created, and portraits of the band, and the lyrics to the songs. There you have the band there. One of the other things I mentioned about Bernie Tormey a lot already, I'm going to mention again, he had a great image as well. He had this kind of pirate image, as you can see in the picture, and really made Gillan, along with obviously Ian Gillan himself and bassist McCoy, had a real visual element to this band. Okay, so more of the artwork and portraits and lyrics there, and then the other vinyl LP is at the back there. So superbly presented without any shadow of a doubt. And this really is a great album. It's a classic album without any shadow of a doubt. As I've already mentioned, Gillan's vocals are on top form, and the songwriting on this album is fantastic. It really, really is. Now, what's also interesting, you'll see I've got a CD version here, which has got an extra 10 tracks on it. Because at this particular time, the band was really prolific in terms of songwriting. And these extra tracks were all intended to be B-sides that could be used in various formats of singles. And later on, they were all collected on this CD version of the album. So if you're going to buy one today, if you're not into vinyl, for sure, make sure you get the CD version with the 10 extra tracks on it. Because there's some crackers. They're not all great, I'll admit, but there are some crackers amongst that, and one especially, which I'll come on to in a little while. So, my favourite 4 from this album. Well, I will say the first track that I really love, the Ballad of the Lucitania Express. Brilliant song. And one of the things that Ian Gillan is very famous for is his lyric writing. He really, not all the time, but he likes to write stories a lot of the time with his lyrics. And this is a great example of that. It's a story of a train journey from Madrid in Spain to Lisbon in Portugal. And he's telling this this story about the journey with great backing music to it. The guitar work and the keyboard work on this track are phenomenal, and it's got speed to it. It's a fast track like a train journey would be, and superb screaming vocals, yeah, from Gillan. Great song. It's the third track on the album. The next track that I would choose is the track that follows it, the title of which is No Laughing in Heaven. Another very creative song by Gillan. Here he's telling the story of someone who wants to get into heaven, and he uses various different voices. He's got the narrator voice. He's got the person who wants to get into heaven, and you've got the devil, and you've got so many different characters in this story between heaven and hell. And great song. I just absolutely love this song. The next track that I would pick. Now this is an interesting one. Gillan became famous for doing some cover songs. And he had great success, single success with his cover songs. And the cover song that he does here is a track called New Orleans. And this is a 1960s rock and roll track. Come on, everybody, take a trip with me. Down from Mississippi down to New Orleans. I think you'll probably know it now if you didn't know it before. And they do a brilliant job with it, really heavying it up. Metalizing it compared to the original version. They also do another one around this time as well, another cover song that's not on the album, but it's one of the bonus tracks, Trouble. If you're looking for trouble, and they do it in a similar style to New Orleans. Brilliant. And then the last track that I would pick is the album tour de force, so to speak. It's titled Bite the Bullet. And long track with a brilliant guitar solo from Tormey in the middle of the track, and also there's another one at the end of the track, and a real fast-paced rocking track with again great lyrics and amazing vocals from Gillan. The vocals from Gillan throughout on this album are absolutely amazing. So they are my favourite 4. Now, I just want to talk a little bit more about this album and in terms of the track listing. Because as I said, on the bonus tracks, there's another 10 tracks here. And A track that I so wish had been on this album is a track called MAD, Mutually Assured Destruction. And it's a track where Gillan sings about nuclear war, which was a big shadow that loomed over the world at that particular time in the 80s. There was a lot of talk about problems between America and Russia and potential for nuclear war. Some things just never change, do they? 40 years on, now we've got America, China and Russia. Hey. Okay, so it doesn't matter how many songs you write about it, how many protests you do about it, we're still going to be in this kind of mire. That's just the way the world is. We can't just get along. So, yeah, this song, Mutually Assured Destruction, it's a fantastic song. And it's such a shame that it didn't make the album. I've no idea why it wasn't on the album. But you could have... the last 3 songs on this album are good songs. All the songs before it are all brilliant songs. And for my favourite 4, I could have picked other tracks like Future Shock or Night Ride Out of Phoenix, Sacre Bleu, which has again got brilliant lyrics to it. But the last 3 tracks are all okay tracks. So you could have dropped one of those tracks and put on Mutually Assured Destruction, and it had taken this album up from what is already a very high level to stratospheric levels. But anyway, still a brilliant, brilliant album, and happy 40th anniversary to ya, Future Shock. So, that's my thoughts on the Future Shock album. I'm going to talk a little bit about the first time that I saw Gillan live. But before I do that, let's take a look at Rock T-shirts by the Sea. Okay, so the first time that I saw Gillan Band live, it was on the tour for Magic album, which turned out to be their last studio album. And this was actually my second ever gig, and it was in November 1982. At the Manchester Apollo in the UK. Price of the ticket, £4.50, 4 English pounds 50. And there was a support band by the name of Spider who also played. Now, on a previous episode I talked about the first ever gig that I went to, which was just a month or 2 before that one, and it was Saxon at the Manchester Apollo. And one of the other early gigs I went to, Whitesnake, and one of the other early gigs I went to, Deep Purple. So it was the early 80s for me were a brilliant time. This was my introduction to rock and metal, and I was very fortunate in those first 2 or 3 years of gig going for me, starting in 1982, that I got to see some amazing bands in those periods of time. And interestingly, the Deep Purple gig was because after Gillan disbanded the band Gillan at the end of 82, he had a short stint with Black Sabbath. That's another episode to talk about for sure, that period of time. And then he rejoined Deep Purple, which is the tour I saw them on there, the Perfect Strangers tour. An amazing gig at Nebworth. Again, a future episode. So let's get back on track, and this gig. So, the opening band, Spider, I don't really remember much about them, and they didn't last for very long as a band. But one thing I do remember, they were allegedly the new status quo. At this particular time in the 80s, some of you will remember that Status Quo were close to calling it a day, and did actually do a farewell tour Although here we are many years later, one original member left and they're still going. But that's a whole other story. So Spider were okay, boogie rock, brilliant. And then Gillan came on. Remember, this is my second ever gig. I've been blown away by Saxon, not just with the music, but the production and the light show. And now I'm seeing Gillan, this icon of hard rock metal music at this particular time. He's there right in front of me. I seem to remember, let me check again. Yeah, I had a reasonable ticket, row R, which isn't that far back at the Manchester Apollo. And more than likely, I think I also seem to remember, as would always happen at gigs in those days, the minute the band came on, everyone rushed forward anyway. So I actually seem to remember it was a lot closer than that, near the front. And it was great to be able to see such an icon, a band that I'd seen on Top of the Pops, a British music show, because they had singles on Top of the Pops, and there they are in front of me. Amazing, and they're playing these brilliant tracks. It's a great set list, a good spread of songs throughout their career, a couple of Deep Purple songs, Black Knight and Smoke on the Water, of course. But one of the other things that got me, and I will never ever forget it, and I will never ever understand it, is that they also had topless go-go dancers on stage with them. Now, I have no idea why. I've tried to find out the history of the reason why. And if anyone does know, please put in the comments below if you can tell me why they did it, or you can remember what the link was as such to the Magic Tour and these topless dancers, or that Gillan just liked to have tits on stage with him. I don't blame him, to be honest. And as a teenage kid at the time, this was amazing. A few months earlier, my first ever gig, I'd seen this giant eagle descending and all this dry ice and this amazing production from Saxon. And then a few weeks later, I'm watching this other band, second ever gig, and there's massive tits on good-looking women all over the stage. What's not to like about rock and metal? And here I am, 40 years later, still into it. Love it, love it, love it, love it. So, a great gig. Such a shame. I was really saddened when, not long after this gig, Gillan called it a day, because I thought the Gillan band, and still to this day, I think the Gillan band and some of their albums are just fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So, talking about the Gillan albums, now they only had 6 albums in their discography, studio discography. So I'm not going to pick a favourite 4. What I will do is I will tell you my favourite 3 albums that I would suggest you go and check out if you want to get into Gillan. Of course, Future Shock. I mentioned it earlier, on a par with Future Shock for me, the album Glory Road. This is another edition that has several, this has got 7 extra bonus tracks on it. So if you're going to hunt it out, look for that one. And then the other album I would choose is this one down here, Double Trouble. This is another amazing vinyl hardback edition, double vinyl again. And this was actually, as referenced by the title, Double Trouble, was a double album. We'll come on to this another episode, but certainly I would recommend Double Trouble too. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Please press the red button to subscribe to the channel to see future episodes on Gillan and on his time in Deep Purple as well. It's free, it's easy to do, just press the red button below and you are subscribed. Thank you very much for watching again, and remember, as always, we rock!